Ethan Carter glanced once more at his boarding pass. The bold letters and numbers confirming his seat, 2A. He tucked the slip into his jacket pocket, took a deep breath, and stepped toward the gate. The bustling airport terminal buzzed with the usual symphony of rolling suitcases, chattering passengers, and the intermittent announcements over the PA system. It was early morning, yet the air was thick with anticipation and the promise of new beginnings. At 52, Ethan had carved out a successful career in marketing. His name synonymous with innovative campaigns and strategic brilliance. Today, however, was not about work. It was the culmination of months of relentless effort on a high-stakes project that had consumed his every waking hour. The end was near, and he was ready to reclaim his life, even if only for a brief period. Clad in a crisp navy suit that spoke of both professionalism and understated elegance, Ethan exuded confidence. His salt and pepper hair was neatly combed back, and his eyes, a deep shade of brown, held a mix of determination and relief. As he navigated through the crowded corridors, his carry-on rolled smoothly behind him, reflecting his organized nature. Passing by a group of animated families and hurried business travelers, Ethan couldn't help but smile at the sight of children darting between legs and the clinking of coffee cups being hurriedly sipped. The airport was a microcosm of the world, diverse, chaotic, and full of untold stories. Today, he was about to add his own chapter to this sprawling narrative. Approaching the jet bridge, Ethan exchanged polite pleasantries with the flight attendants. Their warm smiles and efficient demeanor always had a calming effect on him. Boarding was swift, and soon he found himself walking down the narrow pathway that connected the terminal to the aircraft. The first-class cabin loomed ahead, its promise of comfort and tranquility a stark contrast to the hustle he had just left behind. As he stepped onto the plane, the subtle scent of leather and the soft hum of the engines greeted him. The first-class section was a sanctuary of space and luxury, with wider seats, ample legroom, and a subdued lighting that immediately signaled a retreat from the chaos of the airport. Ethan made his way to his assigned seat, 2A, near the window. He placed his carry-on in the overhead compartment with practiced ease and sank into the plush leather seat, feeling the tension of the past months begin to ease. Closing his eyes, Ethan allowed himself a moment of blissful relaxation. The hum of the plane and the gentle vibration beneath him created a soothing backdrop, perfect for unwinding. He envisioned the serene beaches and quiet evenings that awaited him, a stark contrast to the high-pressure environment of his daily life. This vacation was not just a break, it was a reward, a chance to recharge and reconnect with himself. As other passengers began to settle in, Ethan felt a sense of camaraderie. There was a shared understanding among those who had fought hard to secure their place in this exclusive section. He observed the subtle interactions, the exchange of smiles, the courteous nods, as everyone prepared for the journey ahead. Minutes later, the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing the final preparations for takeoff. The cabin crew moved with practiced precision, attending to the last-minute details that ensured a smooth departure. Ethan glanced out the window, watching as the ground crew made their final checks on the tarmac. The sight was both reassuring and exhilarating, a prelude to the adventure that lay beyond the horizon. But amidst this calm, the atmosphere was about to change. The first-class cabin, a realm of quiet sophistication, was about to become the stage for an unexpected confrontation that would challenge more than just seating arrangements. Ethan, ever the professional, was unaware that his decision to engage in a simple dialogue would set off a chain of events with far-reaching implications. A soft murmur began to rise beside him. Opening his eyes, Ethan noticed a woman approaching, a stark contrast to the serene environment. Laura Mitchell, a middle-aged white woman with an air of impatience, stood by his side, her eyes fixed on his seat number. "Excuse me," Laura began, her voice sharp and tinged with irritation. "I think you might be in the wrong seat." Ethan looked down at his boarding pass, then back at Laura, his expression calm and composed. "I'm sorry," he replied, his tone measured and polite, "but I believe this is my seat, 2A. Laura's eyes darted to his boarding pass and then back to his face. Her lips pursed, and her tone dripped with condescension. "This is the first-class cabin," she stated, the implication of her words hanging heavy in the air. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Ethan felt a familiar tightness in his chest, a sensation he had encountered far too many times before. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. "Yes, ma'am," he responded, his voice unwavering. "I am exactly where I'm supposed to be." The woman's frustration was palpable as she glanced around, seemingly seeking support from the surrounding passengers. "There must be some mistake," she insisted, her voice growing louder. "Perhaps you misread your ticket." The economy section is further back. Ethan reached into his jacket pocket, ready to produce his boarding pass if necessary. His mind raced, recalling past incidents where similar confrontations had unfolded. He had prepared himself for moments like these, understanding that professionalism and patience were his best tools. Before the situation could escalate further, Sofia Ramirez, a flight attendant with a warm smile and an air of authority, approached. "Is everything all right here?" she inquired, her gaze moving between Ethan and Laura. Ethan handed over his boarding pass without hesitation. Sofia took it, glanced at it briefly, and then nodded. "Everything appears to be in order, sir. This is indeed your assigned seat," she confirmed, her voice calm and reassuring. Laura looked visibly flustered, her earlier confidence waning under Sofia's validation. I apologize," she muttered, retreating to her designated seat across the aisle. The tension in the cabin began to dissipate as other passengers resumed their activities. Though the undercurrent of what had transpired lingered in the air, Ethan let out a sigh of relief, his shoulders relaxing slightly. He glanced around the cabin, noticing the mix of judgmental glances and curious stares from other first-class passengers. It was a familiar sight, one that had become all too common in his experiences. Yet, he refused to let it dampen his spirits. As the plane began to taxi toward the runway, Ethan reflected on the encounter. He could choose to let it pass, retreating into the comfort of his seat and the tranquility of his upcoming vacation. Or he could take a different path, one that might challenge assumptions and foster understanding. The decision weighed heavily on him, a crossroads that would shape not just his flight, but potentially the lives of those around him. With the engines roaring to life and the plane lifting off the ground, Ethan made his choice. He would not let this moment slip away. Instead, he would seize the opportunity to engage in a meaningful dialogue, hoping to transcend the confines of the aircraft and touch on broader societal issues. As the plane reached cruising altitude and the seatbelt sign blinked off, Ethan felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey ahead was not just a physical one, it was a journey toward change, understanding, and connection. Little did he know that this flight, a seemingly ordinary trip to unwind, would become the catalyst for something far more significant, a movement born from a single act of courage and empathy. The cabin settled into a comfortable silence, the passengers unaware of the transformative conversation that was about to unfold. Ethan glanced out the window once more, the clouds passing by like fleeting thoughts, and prepared himself for what was to come. This flight was more than just a passage from one place to another, it was the beginning of a story that would resonate far beyond the boundaries of 30,000 feet. Ethan Carter had barely settled into the plush embrace of his first-class seat when the tranquility of the cabin was disrupted. A soft murmur grew louder beside him, drawing his attention. He opened his eyes to see a woman approaching, a stark contrast to the serene environment he had been enjoying moments ago. Laura Mitchell, a middle-aged white woman with an air of impatience, stood by his side, her eyes fixed intently on his seat number. "Excuse me," Laura began, her voice sharp and tinged with irritation. "I think you might be in the wrong seat." Ethan glanced down at his boarding pass, confirming his assigned seat, 2A. He felt a flicker of déjà vu memories of similar confrontations surfacing uninvited. Taking a deep breath, he met Laura's gaze with a calm and composed demeanor. "I'm sorry," he replied, his tone measured and polite, "but I believe this is my seat, 2A. Laura's eyes darted from his boarding pass to his face, her expression morphing into one of skepticism. Her lips pursed, and her tone dripped with condescension. "This is the first-class cabin," she stated, the implication of her words hanging heavy in the air. "Are you sure you're in the right place?" Ethan felt a familiar tightness in his chest, a sensation he had encountered far too many times before. He could sense the undercurrent of unspoken prejudices lurking beneath Laura's polite facade. Reminding himself of the countless similar encounters he had endured, he maintained his composure. "Yes, ma'am," he responded, his voice unwavering. "I am exactly where I'm supposed to be." Laura's frustration was palpable as she glanced around, seemingly seeking validation from the surrounding passengers. "There must be some mistake," she insisted, her voice growing louder. "Perhaps you misread your ticket. The economy section is further back." Ethan reached into his jacket pocket, ready to produce his boarding pass if necessary. His mind raced, recalling past incidents where similar confrontations had unfolded. Each time, he had to muster the patience and professionalism to navigate through the discomfort. He had prepared himself for moments like these, understanding that his best tools were calmness and clarity. Before the situation could escalate further, Sofia Ramirez, a flight attendant with a warm smile and an air of authority, approached the scene. Her presence commanded attention. And the tension in the cabin seemed to hold its breath. "Is everything all right here?" she inquired. Her gaze shifting between Ethan and Laura with practiced ease. Ethan handed over his boarding pass without hesitation. His movements deliberate and steady. Sophia took the document, glanced at it briefly, and then nodded. "Everything appears to be in order, sir. This is indeed your assigned seat," she confirmed. Her voice calm and reassuring. Laura looked visibly flustered, her earlier confidence wavering under Sophia's validation. She opened her mouth to speak but faltered, muttering an apology before retreating to her designated seat across the aisle. The tension in the cabin began to dissipate as other passengers resumed their activities. Though the undercurrent of what had transpired lingered in the air, Ethan let out a sigh of relief, his shoulders relaxing slightly. He glanced around the cabin, noticing the mix of judgmental glances and curious stares from other first-class passengers. It was a familiar sight, one that had become all too common in his experiences. Yet, he refused to let it dampen his spirits. As the plane began to taxi toward the runway, the initial confrontation weighed heavily on his mind. Ethan could feel the eyes of the passengers lingering on him, some filled with empathy, others with unspoken assumptions. He wondered how many had witnessed similar moments. How many had silently borne the burden of proving their place in spaces that were supposed to be a sanctuary of comfort and privilege. Sophia remained nearby, her demeanor professional as she moved down the aisle to attend to other passengers. Ethan appreciated her intervention, recognizing that without her calm authority, the situation could have escalated into something more uncomfortable. He admired her ability to maintain order and grace under pressure, a quality he wished he possessed more often. The cabin settled back into a comfortable silence, the hum of the engines and the soft rustling of passengers adjusting their belongings filling the space once more. Ethan leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes briefly to regain his composure. The incident had stirred something within him, a reminder of the persistent undercurrents of bias that still marred even the most refined environments. He couldn't shake the feeling that this was more than just a simple seating mix-up. It was a reflection of deeper societal issues, a microcosm of the prejudices that lingered beneath the surface of everyday interactions. As the plane began its ascent, Ethan's mind raced with thoughts of how he might address these unspoken biases, not just for himself, but for others who might find themselves in similar situations. The engines roared louder as the plane lifted off the ground, and Ethan gazed out the window, watching the airport terminal shrink into the distance. The sky stretched out endlessly before him, a vast expanse that mirrored the endless possibilities for change and understanding. He resolved to use this moment, this confrontation, as a catalyst for something greater, a chance to foster dialogue and challenge the assumptions that had long been ingrained in society. As the plane reached cruising altitude, the initial tension had largely faded, but the impact of the confrontation remained. Ethan knew that the journey ahead was not just a physical one, it was a journey toward personal growth and societal change. He was determined to seize the opportunity, to transform a moment of conflict into a platform for meaningful conversation and reflection. Little did he know, this flight was about to become much more than a passage to his vacation destination. It was the beginning of a story that would resonate far beyond the confines of the airplane cabin, touching lives and inspiring change in ways he had never imagined. The first-class cabin, once a realm of quiet sophistication, had become the stage for an unexpected confrontation, a moment that would challenge more than just seating arrangements. As the passengers settled into their routines, the echoes of that brief exchange lingered, a silent reminder of the work still needed to bridge the gaps of understanding and acceptance in the world. Ethan took another deep breath, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. The flight had taken an unexpected turn, but he was ready to navigate the turbulence with grace and determination. This was his moment to make a difference. One conversation at a time. Ethan Carter leaned back in his seat, the initial tension of the confrontation still pulsing beneath the surface of his calm exterior. As the plane settled into its cruising altitude, the hum of the engines provided a steady backdrop to his swirling thoughts. He glanced around the cabin, noting the lingering glances from fellow passengers, some sympathetic, others curious, a few dismissive. Each look felt like a silent echo of the unspoken biases that had just surfaced beside him. The memory of Laura Mitchell's confrontational stance replayed in his mind. Her insistence that he didn't belong in first class wasn't just about a misplaced seat, it was a manifestation of deeper, more ingrained prejudices. Ethan had faced similar moments before, each one leaving a mark of frustration and a reminder of the societal hurdles he continued to navigate. Yet, unlike those past encounters, something about this moment felt different. There was a palpable opportunity here, a chance to transform conflict into understanding. He took a deep breath, feeling the cool air of the cabin fill his lungs. The decision weighed heavily on him: retreat into the safety of silence and let the incident fade into the background, or seize the moment to address the underlying issues that had been thrust into the open. The latter option was daunting, fraught with uncertainty and the risk of further confrontation. But Ethan knew that silence only perpetuated the very prejudices he sought to challenge. As the minutes ticked by, Ethan's resolve solidified. He would not let this moment slip away. Instead, he would use it as a catalyst for meaningful dialogue. The thought was both empowering and nerve-wracking. But he felt a deep-seated need to advocate for understanding and empathy, not just for himself, but for others who might find themselves in similar situations. Glancing back at Laura, Ethan saw her now occupying the seat across the aisle. Her shoulders tense and her expression guarded. He could tell she was still processing the encounter, her earlier irritation giving way to a flicker of uncertainty. Gathering his courage, Ethan decided to make the first move. "Excuse me, Laura," he began, his voice steady yet gentle enough to convey sincerity without confrontation. "I hope you don't mind me saying this, but I'd like to talk about what just happened." Laura looked up, surprise evident in her eyes. For a moment, she hesitated, as if weighing whether to engage or dismiss his request. The cabin seemed to hold its breath, the other passengers' eyes subtly shifting toward the two of them. Sensing the potential for something significant to unfold, Ethan continued, choosing his words with care. "I understand that you might be frustrated or confused, but I believe there's more to this situation than just a seat assignment. Can we discuss it?" There was a long pause before Laura finally nodded, albeit reluctantly. She placed her magazine on the tray table and leaned slightly forward, her demeanor softening. "I suppose it's necessary," she conceded, her voice wavering between defensiveness and curiosity. The flight attendant, Sophia Ramirez, watched from a short distance away, her presence a reassuring reminder that the situation was being handled with professionalism. Ethan appreciated her discreet support, recognizing the delicate balance she maintained in managing the cabin's dynamics. Ethan took a deep breath, sensing the importance of this moment. "Thank you. I want to understand why you felt the need to challenge my presence here. Was it purely about the seat? Or is there something more?" Laura hesitated, her eyes darting away as if searching for the right words. I've never seen someone like you in first class before. It's unusual. And it made me uncomfortable." Ethan felt a surge of emotion, hurt? Yes. But also a profound sense of responsibility. He could see the beginnings of realization in her eyes, the first cracks in the facade of her prejudice. "I appreciate your honesty, Laura. It's exactly this kind of honesty that can help us address and overcome our biases. I'm here because I earned this seat, just like anyone else. But I'd like to understand where your discomfort is coming from." Laura shifted in her seat, her hands nervously twisting the edge of her sleeve. "I didn't mean to offend. It's just, I've always associated first class with a certain type of person, and seeing you here didn't fit that image." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "I understand that we all have preconceived notions based on our experiences and societal stereotypes. It's important to recognize those biases and question where they come from. By acknowledging them, we can begin to break down those barriers." The conversation was far from easy, but Ethan could feel a shift occurring. Laura's initial defensiveness was giving way to introspection, her rigid stance softening as she grappled with the realization of her own biases. The other passengers watched quietly, some offering subtle nods of approval, others simply appreciating the unfolding dialogue. As the plane continued its steady journey through the sky, Ethan and Laura delved deeper into the conversation. They spoke about their backgrounds, their experiences, and the subtle ways in which societal prejudices had influenced their perceptions. It was a vulnerable exchange, one that required both courage and empathy from both parties. Ethan shared his journey as a Black professional navigating spaces that were not always welcoming, the constant need to prove his worth, and the emotional toll it took. Laura listened intently, her initial irritation transforming into a genuine desire to understand and rectify her own misconceptions. She admitted her discomfort was rooted in unfamiliarity and a lack of exposure to diversity in such settings. "This is eye-opening," Laura confessed, her voice tinged with regret. "I never realized how my assumptions affected my behavior. I want to change that." Ethan smiled gently, feeling a sense of accomplishment. "It's a process, and it starts with conversations like this. By talking openly about our biases, we can begin to dismantle them." The cabin, once a space of silent judgment and tension, had become a forum for empathy and learning. Other passengers, inspired by the dialogue between Ethan and Laura, began to engage in their own conversations about race, privilege, and discrimination. The atmosphere shifted from one of exclusion to one of collective introspection. As the flight progressed, the initial confrontation had blossomed into a broader discussion, touching on personal stories and societal issues. The boundaries that had once seemed so rigid were melting away, replaced by a shared understanding and a commitment to fostering a more inclusive environment. Ethan looked around the cabin, feeling a deep sense of hope. This moment, born out of conflict, had the potential to spark meaningful change not just within these confined walls, but far beyond. He realized that sometimes, the most significant transformations begin with a single, courageous conversation. As the plane continued its journey, Ethan felt a renewed purpose. This flight was no longer just a passage to his vacation destination, it was a journey toward greater understanding and connection. And he was determined to make the most of it. One conversation at a time. The hum of the airplane's engines provided a steady backdrop as Ethan and Laura sat across from each other, the initial stiffness of their interaction beginning to thaw. The other passengers had retreated into their own worlds, some engrossed in books, others scrolling through their devices. But a few exchanged glances, sensing the shift in the cabin's atmosphere. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle around him. He knew that initiating this conversation was both a risk and an opportunity, a chance to bridge gaps and foster understanding where there had been none. With a gentle smile, he began, aiming to create a space where vulnerability and honesty could thrive. "Laura," he started, his voice soft yet steady, "I appreciate you agreeing to talk. I think it's important for both of us to understand where we're coming from." Laura glanced down at her hands, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her sleeve. She took a moment before responding, her voice wavering between defensiveness and curiosity. "I suppose so. I never really thought about it before, why I felt the way I did." Ethan nodded, encouraging her to continue. "It's natural to have preconceived notions based on our experiences and the world around us. The key is recognizing them and understanding how they influence our behavior." Laura sighed, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "I guess I've always associated first class with a certain image, successful. Perhaps even a bit exclusive. Seeing someone like you here didn't fit that image, and it made me uncomfortable." Ethan leaned forward, his expression empathetic. "That's a common bias. And it's something many people might not even realize they have. It's called unconscious bias, those automatic associations we make based on stereotypes or limited experiences." Laura looked up, meeting his gaze for the first time. "Unconscious bias," she echoed thoughtfully. "I hadn't heard that term before. But it makes sense. I can see how my assumptions were unfounded." Before Ethan could respond, a voice interjected from the aisle. "I think it's great that you're having this conversation." James Anderson, a middle-aged man seated a few rows back, said, leaning slightly forward to join the discussion. His presence was commanding yet warm, and he held a respectful distance from both Ethan and Laura. "It's important for all of us to recognize and address our biases. Ethan, I admire your approach here." Ethan smiled gratefully at James. "Thank you, James. Your support means a lot." James nodded, his eyes sincere. "We all have biases, whether we realize it or not. Acknowledging them is the first step toward creating a more inclusive environment for everyone." Laura looked between Ethan and James, her initial resistance melting away as she absorbed their words. "I appreciate you both taking the time to explain this to me. It's eye-opening." Ethan reached out, offering a reassuring gesture. "It's a learning process for all of us. By talking openly about these issues, we can start to make meaningful changes." At that moment, another voice chimed in from the aisle, capturing the attention of those nearby. "I've never really thought about how these biases affect people in everyday situations." Lillian Gwynn, a young woman in her late 20s seated 2 rows behind Ethan, admitted, her tone reflective. "It must be exhausting to constantly face that kind of scrutiny." Lily's comment resonated with Ethan and Laura, adding depth to the conversation. "It can be," Ethan agreed. "But moments like these, where we can have honest discussions, are how we begin to change things." The cabin, once a place of silent judgment, was now a forum for empathy and understanding. Other passengers started to engage, sharing their own experiences and perspectives. A middle-aged man with a kind face added, "I remember a time when I was the only person of color in a room full of colleagues. It took me a while to find my voice, but support from others made a huge difference." A young woman nodded in agreement, Inclusivity is something we need to actively work on, both personally and professionally. It's not enough to just be aware of our biases, we have to take steps to counteract them. Laura listened intently, her eyes reflecting a mix of realization and remorse. I never intended to make you feel unwelcome, Ethan. I see now how my actions were based on unfounded assumptions. I want to do better. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her arm. Acknowledging it is a big step forward. Change takes time, but conversations like these are crucial in that journey. The dialogue continued to flow, with passengers sharing stories of their own struggles and triumphs in overcoming biases. The atmosphere in the cabin had transformed from one of tension to one of collective introspection and support. The confined space of the airplane seemed to amplify the significance of their interactions, turning it into a microcosm of the broader societal changes they all hoped to see. Sofia Ramirez, the flight attendant, observed the unfolding conversation with a thoughtful expression. She had witnessed many conflicts and negotiations before, but this was different. There was a genuine desire for understanding and growth among the passengers, and she felt a sense of pride in the positive energy that had taken hold of the cabin. As the flight progressed, the initial confrontation had paved the way for a series of meaningful exchanges. Ethan and Laura found common ground, their conversation evolving into a deeper exploration of race, privilege, and the subtle ways discrimination manifests in daily life. They discussed the importance of diversity in all aspects of society and the role each individual plays in fostering an inclusive environment. James shared his experiences of advocating for diversity in his workplace, highlighting the challenges and rewards that come with pushing for systemic change. Lily spoke about her volunteer work with organizations aimed at supporting underrepresented communities, emphasizing the impact of education and awareness in combating prejudice. The other passengers listened and contributed, creating a tapestry of voices united by a shared commitment to understanding and change. It was a powerful reminder that even in the most unexpected places, such as a first-class airplane cabin, significant conversations could take place, conversations that had the potential to ripple out into the world beyond. As the flight continued toward its destination, Ethan felt a profound sense of accomplishment. What had started as a moment of conflict had blossomed into a catalyst for connection and reflection. The boundaries that had once seemed so rigid were now melting away, replaced by a collective determination to challenge and overcome the biases that divided them. Laura leaned back in her seat, a thoughtful expression on her face. Thank you, Ethan, and everyone for being so open. I have a lot to think about, and I want to take steps to address my own biases. Ethan nodded, feeling a surge of hope. We all have a role to play in this. It's through these honest conversations that we can begin to create meaningful change. As the plane soared through the clouds, the passengers continued to engage in heartfelt discussions, each story adding a new layer to their shared understanding. The confined space of the aircraft had become a sanctuary of empathy and learning, a place where barriers were broken down, and new connections were forged. Ethan glanced around the cabin, seeing faces that had once been strangers now bonded by a common purpose. He realized that this flight was more than just a journey to his vacation destination, it was a journey toward greater understanding and unity. And in that moment, he felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that even the smallest conversations could spark significant transformations. The dialogue had begun, and with it, the foundation for lasting change. As the plane continued its steady ascent, Ethan felt confident that the ripples of this encounter would extend far beyond the confines of the airplane, touching lives and inspiring others to engage in their own journeys of understanding and empathy. The plane cruised steadily through the azure expanse, the steady hum of the engines a constant reminder of the journey unfolding within the confined space of the first-class cabin. What had begun as a tense confrontation between Ethan and Laura had blossomed into a vibrant dialogue, igniting a chain reaction of conversations that rippled through the rows of plush seats. Ethan sat back, observing the transformation around him with a mix of awe and satisfaction. The initial hostility had given way to a collective introspection, as passengers who had once remained silent began to share their own stories and perspectives. The cabin, once a realm of quiet sophistication, had become a forum for empathy and understanding. James Anderson, the middle-aged man who had offered his support earlier, now leaned forward with a thoughtful expression. In my line of work, I've often been the only person of color in the room, he began, his voice steady and resonant. At first, it was isolating, but over time, I found strength in sharing my experiences and advocating for more inclusive practices. It's not easy, but it's necessary. Lillian Gwynn, the young woman who had voiced her exhaustion at facing constant scrutiny, nodded in agreement. I volunteer with several organizations that support underrepresented communities, she added. Education and awareness are key. When people understand each other's struggles, it becomes easier to break down those invisible barriers. Their stories created a tapestry of shared experiences, each thread adding depth and richness to the conversation. The other passengers, inspired by Ethan and Laura's initial exchange, began to open up as well. A businesswoman named Clara Reyes spoke about implementing diversity training in her company, while a retired teacher, Mr. Harold Thompson, shared how he incorporated lessons on unconscious bias into his curriculum, sparking meaningful discussions among his students. Amidst the unfolding dialogue, Sofia Ramirez moved gracefully through the cabin, her presence a calming influence. She paused occasionally to check on passengers, her warm smile and attentive demeanor a comforting constant. Today, however, she found herself drawn into the conversation, offering her own insights from years of witnessing human interactions. You know, Sophia interjected, her voice gentle yet firm. I've seen how small moments can lead to significant changes. It's heartening to see everyone here willing to engage and learn from each other. Ethan smiled, appreciating her participation. Absolutely, Sophia. It's moments like these that remind us of our shared humanity. As the flight progressed, the initial confrontation had set off a profound shift in the cabin's atmosphere. The passengers moved from being mere occupants of the same aircraft to becoming active participants in a collective journey toward understanding and empathy. The confined space, once a symbol of exclusivity and privilege, had transformed into a microcosm of a society striving for inclusivity and respect. Laura Mitchell, who had been silent for a few moments, now spoke up, her voice tinged with vulnerability. I want to apologize again, Ethan. My reaction was based on unfounded assumptions, and I realize now how hurtful that was. I'm committed to doing better. Ethan reached out, placing a reassuring hand on her arm. Acknowledging it is a huge step. Laura, we all have biases, but recognizing them is the first step toward overcoming them. Their exchange was met with nods of approval from the surrounding passengers, a silent endorsement of their commitment to change. The conversation continued to ebb and flow, touching on topics of privilege, systemic inequality, and the importance of allyship. Each story shared was a testament to the power of dialogue in bridging divides and fostering mutual respect. As the hours passed, the passengers found themselves not just traveling to their destinations, but embarking on a shared journey of personal and collective growth. The ripple effects of Ethan and Laura's initial confrontation were evident in every corner of the cabin. As more individuals felt empowered to speak their truths and listen with open hearts, Ethan reflected on the significance of the moment. Realizing that this flight was more than just a passage from one place to another, it was a catalyst for meaningful change. The connections forged here would extend far beyond the confines of the airplane, influencing lives and inspiring actions long after they had landed. Sophia returned to Ethan's side, a thoughtful expression on her face. It's been quite a flight, hasn't it? She remarked, her eyes twinkling with a mix of amusement and admiration. Ethan nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. It certainly has. I never imagined this journey would lead to such profound conversations. Sophia smiled warmly. Sometimes, the most unexpected moments can have the most significant impact. I'm glad to see everyone embracing the opportunity to learn and grow. As the plane began its descent toward their destination, the passengers felt a sense of camaraderie and hope that lingered in the air. The initial tension had been replaced by a collective commitment to fostering understanding and challenging their own prejudices. It was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the power of empathy to transform even the most mundane of settings into arenas of meaningful change. Ethan glanced around the cabin, taking in the diverse faces that had become more than just strangers. They were now fellow travelers on a journey of introspection and progress. He felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that the conversations that had unfolded here would continue to resonate and inspire beyond the boundaries of the airplane. As the wheels of the plane touched down on the runway, the passengers prepared to disembark, each carrying with them the lessons learned and the connections made during this transformative flight. The ripple effects of their dialogue would extend into their lives, fostering a more inclusive and understanding world. One conversation at a time, Ethan stood up, offering a final nod to Laura and the others who had shared in this experience. Thank you all for being open and willing to engage. It's been an honor to share this journey with you. Laura returned his gesture with a sincere smile. Thank you, Ethan. This has been a truly eye-opening experience. As the passengers gathered their belongings and made their way toward the exit, the first-class cabin exuded a sense of unity and optimism. The confined space had served its purpose, bringing together individuals from different walks of life to engage in a dialogue that transcended the boundaries of the flight. It was a powerful reminder that even in the most unlikely places, moments of connection and understanding could spark meaningful change. Ethan took one last look around the cabin. The memories of the conversations and the bonds formed etched into his mind. He stepped off the plane with a sense of accomplishment, knowing that this flight had marked the beginning of a journey toward greater empathy and unity. The ripple effects of their dialogue would continue to spread, influencing lives and fostering a more inclusive society for years to come. As the aircraft began its steady descent, the once vibrant and bustling first-class cabin settled into a more subdued rhythm. The gentle thud of the landing gear extended Ethan's reflections on the profound conversations that had unfolded over the past hours. The sky outside the window transitioned from the deep blues of midday to the warmer hues of late afternoon, casting a serene glow over the passengers. Ethan glanced around the cabin, noticing the subtle shifts in body language. Conversations had softened, and the initial eagerness to share stories had given way to thoughtful silence. Laura Mitchell sat across the aisle from him, her posture relaxed and her expression contemplative. The tension that had once filled the space had dissolved into a shared sense of understanding and mutual respect. Sofia Ramirez, the flight attendant who had gracefully mediated the initial confrontation, moved gracefully through the aisle with her characteristic warmth. She paused briefly beside Ethan, offering a reassuring smile. "We're beginning our final descent, sir. Is there anything else I can assist you with before we land?" Ethan shook his head, appreciating her attentiveness. "No thank you, Sofia. You've been wonderful." Sofia nodded and continued her duties, leaving Ethan to his thoughts. He felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that this flight had transformed from a routine journey into a catalyst for meaningful change. The connections forged here were unexpected but deeply impactful, leaving an indelible mark on everyone involved. As the captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing the imminent landing, Ethan felt a mixture of emotions. The impending conclusion of the flight brought a sense of finality, yet the conversations and revelations would linger long after the wheels touched down. He took a deep breath, savoring the moment of calm before the descent. Across the aisle, Laura reached for her magazine, her movements deliberate and unhurried. She looked up, meeting Ethan's gaze with a newfound openness. "Ethan, I wanted to thank you again for initiating those conversations. It's been eye-opening for me." Ethan smiled warmly. "I'm glad we could talk, Laura. It's important for all of us to engage in these discussions." Laura nodded, her eyes reflecting genuine gratitude. "I never realized how my actions were influenced by unconscious biases. This experience has made me more aware, and I'm committed to doing better." Their exchange was met with approving nods from nearby passengers, a silent acknowledgement of the progress they had made. The cabin, once a space of potential conflict, had become a sanctuary of empathy and growth. The descent continued, and the plane began to glide toward the runway. The passengers started to fasten their seatbelts, the hum of the engines now a constant reminder of their impending arrival. Ethan felt a sense of anticipation, not just for his vacation, but for the impact this flight had already begun to have. As the plane touched down smoothly, the passengers prepared to disembark, gathering their belongings and exchanging final words of gratitude and farewell. Ethan stood up, offering a final nod to Laura and the others who had shared in this transformative experience. "Thank you all for being open and willing to engage," Ethan said, his voice steady and sincere. "It's been an honor to share this journey with you." Laura returned his gesture with a heartfelt smile. "Thank you, Ethan. This has been a truly eye-opening experience." Ethan walked down the aisle, passing by passengers who greeted him with smiles and appreciative nods. The sense of unity and understanding that had blossomed in the cabin was palpable, a testament to the power of honest dialogue and mutual respect. As he approached the exit, Ethan felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to see James Anderson, the supportive middle-aged man from earlier. "Ethan, it was inspiring to see you handle that situation with such grace," James said, extending his hand. "If you ever want to collaborate on promoting these conversations, I'd be more than happy to help." Ethan shook his hand, feeling a surge of hope. "I'd love that, James. Together, we can make a real difference." James smiled. "Let's make it happen." With a final wave to Sofia Ramirez, who had been watching the interactions with a satisfied expression, Ethan stepped off the plane and into the bustling airport terminal. The weight of the past hours settled comfortably around him, replaced by a sense of purpose and the anticipation of what was to come. As he made his way through the terminal, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The conversations on the flight had ignited a spark within him, a desire to continue fostering understanding and challenging biases wherever he went. He knew that the ripple effects of this encounter would extend far beyond the confines of the airplane, influencing lives and inspiring change in ways he had never imagined. The digital storm brewing around him was still unnoticed, but Ethan felt a sense of calm amidst the chaos. He was focused on the journey ahead, determined to use his experiences to create a more inclusive and empathetic world. Little did he know, the impact of that fateful flight was about to expand in ways that would touch countless lives and spark conversations across the nation. As he wheeled his carry-on through the bustling airport, Ethan glanced back one last time, the memory of the cabin conversations vivid in his mind. He felt a profound connection to the strangers who had become allies in that confined space, each of them united by a shared commitment to growth and understanding. With a final deep breath, Ethan turned toward his hotel, ready to embrace the next chapter of his journey. The descent of the plane mirrored his own descent into a new phase of life, one marked by awareness, action, and the unwavering belief that even the smallest conversations could lead to significant transformations. And so, as the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden glow on the airport lights, Ethan felt a renewed sense of hope. The ripple effects of their dialogue were already beginning to spread, and he was eager to see how far those ripples would reach, knowing that each step forward was a step toward a more inclusive and understanding world. The plane had long settled into its cruising altitude, the rhythmic hum of the engines now a familiar backdrop to the unfolding narrative within the first-class cabin. While most passengers had retreated to their own thoughts or settled into quiet conversations, one individual remained acutely aware of the transformative dialogues taking place around her. Ava Thompson, a vibrant social media influencer with a penchant for capturing authentic human moments, found herself irresistibly drawn to the profound interactions between Ethan and Laura. Ava sat a few rows behind Ethan, her sleek smartphone balanced effortlessly in her hand. She had boarded the flight with the intention of documenting her journey, but as the hours passed, her focus shifted to the unexpected catalyst for change unfolding before her eyes. Her followers valued genuine content, and Ava knew that this was a story worth sharing. As Ethan and Laura engaged in their heartfelt conversation, Ava discreetly began recording snippets of their dialogue. She captured the initial confrontation, the gradual thawing of tensions, and the eventual blossoming of empathy and understanding. Each moment was a testament to the power of honest dialogue in bridging divides. Once the flight landed smoothly, Ava wasted no time. She immediately uploaded the videos to her social media platforms, crafting thoughtful captions that highlighted the significance of the conversations she had witnessed. Within hours, her posts began to gain traction, garnering likes, shares, and heartfelt comments from her diverse follower base. The first video, showcasing the initial confrontation, quickly amassed thousands of views. People resonated with Ethan's calm demeanor and Laura's eventual realization of her biases. The subsequent clips, featuring the broader discussions among passengers, sparked even more engagement. Hashtags like #FirstClassLesson, #FlightsOfUnderstanding, and #BreakingBias began trending across Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Ava watched in awe as her posts went viral. The story transcended the confines of social media, catching the attention of major news outlets. Within a day, national news channels featured segments on the viral videos, dissecting the incident and its broader implications for societal attitudes towards race and inclusion. Ethan found himself inundated with media requests. He was invited to appear on talk shows, participate in panel discussions, and contribute op-eds to prominent newspapers. Each interview provided him with a platform to delve deeper into the issues of unconscious bias and the importance of open dialogue in fostering understanding. Laura, initially hesitant to engage with the newfound attention, eventually decided to join Ethan in sharing her journey of self-reflection. Together, they appeared on a popular morning show, where Laura candidly discussed her initial discomfort, the realization of her biases, and her commitment to personal growth. Their joint appearance was met with overwhelming support and encouragement from viewers, further amplifying the message of empathy and change. The media frenzy extended beyond traditional outlets. Podcasts dedicated entire episodes to analyzing the incident, while online forums buzzed with debates and discussions. Educational institutions began incorporating the story into their diversity and inclusion curricula, using it as a real-world example of how individual actions can spark broader societal conversations. Public reactions were as diverse as the platforms disseminating the story. Supporters lauded Ethan and Laura for their courage in addressing uncomfortable truths, while critics questioned the authenticity of the interactions and the motivations behind Ava's recordings. Nevertheless, the overarching sentiment leaned towards appreciation for the meaningful dialogue and the potential for positive change. One particularly impactful comment came from a high school teacher named Ms. Rachel Green, who wrote, "This story is exactly what we need more of in today's society. It shows that change starts with honest conversations. Thank you, Ethan and Laura, for being brave enough to share your experiences." Meanwhile, Daniel Hayes, a successful businessman and advocate for corporate diversity, reached out to Ethan with a proposal to collaborate on a nationwide campaign promoting inclusive practices in the workplace. Daniel recognized the potential of leveraging the viral moment to effect tangible change within organizations struggling with diversity and inclusion. As the weeks turned into months, the ripple effects of the viral incident continued to expand. Civil rights organizations partnered with Ethan to develop workshops and seminars aimed at addressing racial bias in everyday situations. Schools invited Olivia Brooks, the documentary filmmaker who had chronicled the original flight experience, to screen her film and lead discussions with students about the importance of empathy and understanding. The airline industry, under increasing scrutiny, initiated comprehensive training programs for their staff, focusing on recognizing and mitigating unconscious bias. Other major carriers followed suit, implementing similar initiatives to ensure that every passenger felt respected and valued, regardless of their background. Ava Thompson's role in amplifying the story did not go unnoticed. She was invited to speak at conferences about the power of social media in driving social change, sharing her experience of witnessing and documenting a moment that transcended the digital realm to impact real-world perceptions and behaviors. Despite the whirlwind of attention, Ethan remained grounded. He continued his professional responsibilities with the same dedication. Now complemented by his advocacy work, the messages of gratitude and stories of personal transformation poured in from individuals inspired by his and Laura's journey, reinforcing his belief in the power of open dialogue. One evening, as Ethan reviewed the latest feedback from his advocacy initiatives, he received a message that stood out. It was from a young black professional named Malik, who wrote, "Watching you stand your ground with such dignity and then turn that moment into a teaching opportunity gave me the courage to address similar situations in my own life. You showed me that it's possible to challenge prejudice without losing your humanity." Ethan felt a profound sense of fulfillment reading Malik's words. The incident on that flight had indeed become a catalyst for change, inspiring individuals to take action in their own lives and communities. It was a testament to the enduring impact of one courageous conversation and the ripple effects it could generate. As the first anniversary of the flight approached, Olivia Brooks reached out with an exciting proposal. She wanted to reunite the passengers from that first-class cabin to reflect on how the experience had changed them. Initially hesitant, Ethan recognized the value in documenting the long-term impact of that day and agreed to participate. The reunion was a heartfelt gathering, with each passenger sharing their journey since the flight. Laura spoke about her continued self-reflection and involvement in diversity training, while James Anderson discussed his efforts to promote inclusive hiring practices at his company. Lillian Gwynn shared stories of her expanding volunteer work and the ripple effects it had within her community. Sophia Ramirez, the flight attendant who had played a pivotal role in mediating the initial confrontation, expressed her pride in witnessing the transformation. "It's incredible to see how one moment can lead to so much positive change," she remarked, her eyes shining with emotion. The documentary, titled Flights of Understanding, premiered at a major film festival to critical acclaim. It showcased not only the incident itself but also the profound ways it had influenced the lives of those involved and society at large. The final scene featured Ethan giving a TED-style talk aboard an airplane, now a symbol of the journey toward empathy and unity. As the credits rolled, Ethan sat in quiet contemplation, reflecting on the journey that had begun with a single act of courage and empathy. The ripple effects of that flight had spread far wider than he could have ever imagined, touching lives and inspiring change across the nation. It was a powerful reminder that meaningful conversations, no matter how small, have the potential to transform the world. The story of Ethan, Laura, Ava, and the others was far from over. It was a living testament to the enduring power of human connection and the unwavering belief that through understanding and dialogue, a more inclusive and compassionate society was within reach. The first rays of dawn filtered through the large windows of Ethan Carter's hotel room, casting a warm glow on the array of notes and articles scattered across his desk. The events of the past year had transformed his life in ways he had never imagined. From a routine vacation flight to becoming a national symbol for change, Ethan reflected on the journey that had begun in the confined space of a first-class cabin. Ethan sat at his desk, reviewing the latest correspondence from various organizations eager to collaborate on diversity and inclusion initiatives. His phone buzzed incessantly with messages from supporters, friends, and even strangers who had been inspired by his story. Each message was a testament to the ripple effects that a single moment of courage and empathy could generate. Across town, Olivia Brooks prepared for the premiere of her documentary, Flights of Understanding. The film had garnered critical acclaim, praised for its honest portrayal of the transformative power of dialogue. As the director, Olivia had poured her heart into capturing not just the incident itself but the profound personal journeys that followed. She arrived early at the theater, ensuring every detail was perfect for the screening. Inside the auditorium, the atmosphere was electric. Attendees included industry professionals, activists, educators, and everyday individuals who had been touched by the story. Among them were Ethan's colleagues from his marketing firm, James Anderson and Daniel Hayes, both of whom had become close allies in his advocacy work. As the lights dimmed, Olivia took the stage, her presence commanding yet approachable. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she began, her voice steady and filled with emotion. "This documentary is not just about a flight, it's about the conversations that can change lives and, ultimately, our society." The screen flickered to life, displaying footage from the original flight, the initial confrontation, the heartfelt dialogues, and the subsequent interactions that had sparked a nationwide conversation. As the film progressed, viewers saw the lasting impact on each passenger, from Laura Mitchell's ongoing self-reflection and activism to Ethan's expanded role as a spokesperson for diversity and inclusion. After the screening, the audience erupted into applause. Moved by the powerful storytelling and the genuine connections portrayed on screen, Ethan joined Olivia on stage. His presence met with cheers and appreciative nods. "This experience has taught me that meaningful change starts with us." Ethan addressed the crowd, his voice strong and sincere. "Every conversation, every moment of understanding, contributes to a larger movement toward a more inclusive and compassionate world." James stepped forward, adding, "We've seen firsthand how one moment can ignite a series of positive changes. It's our responsibility to keep this momentum going, to continue fostering dialogue and challenging our own biases." Daniel took the microphone next, outlining the plans for a nationwide campaign aimed at promoting inclusive practices in workplaces, schools, and communities. The initiative, supported by major corporations and educational institutions, sought to provide resources, workshops, and seminars inspired by the flight's legacy. As the evening progressed, attendees shared their own stories of transformation, inspired by Ethan and Laura's journey. The room was filled with a sense of unity and purpose, a collective commitment to driving societal change. Back at his hotel, Ethan received an invitation to speak at a national conference on diversity and inclusion. It was an opportunity to reach an even broader audience, to share his experiences and advocate for systemic change. He accepted with gratitude, knowing that each platform was another chance to amplify the message of empathy and understanding. In the months that followed, the impact of that fateful flight continued to spread. Schools incorporated the story into their curricula, using it as a case study for discussions on race, privilege, and unconscious bias. Corporations adopted the training programs initiated by the airline industry, ensuring that their employees were equipped to recognize and mitigate biases in the workplace. Ethan and Laura became regular contributors to panel discussions and workshops, their shared experiences serving as powerful examples of personal growth and the importance of addressing prejudices. Their partnership symbolized the potential for reconciliation and mutual understanding, bridging gaps that had once seemed insurmountable. One evening, as Ethan prepared for another speaking engagement, he received a heartfelt message from Malik, the young black professional who had found courage in his story. "Your journey has inspired me to take action in my own life." Malik wrote, "I've started a mentorship program for young professionals of color, and I can't thank you enough for showing me that change is possible." Ethan felt a profound sense of fulfillment, knowing that his actions had sparked tangible positive outcomes. The legacy of that flight was evident in the lives it had touched and the changes it had inspired. It was a living testament to the power of human connection and the enduring impact of one courageous conversation. As he boarded a flight to his next destination, a speaking engagement at a major university, Ethan glanced around the cabin. Now a symbol of his journey, he thought of the initial confrontation, the ensuing dialogue, and the far-reaching effects that had followed. The confined space of the airplane had transformed into a sanctuary of empathy and understanding, a place where barriers were broken down, and new connections were forged. Sitting by the window, Ethan reflected on the lessons learned. He realized that while the journey toward a more inclusive society was ongoing, each step taken was a victory worth celebrating. The ripple effects of their dialogue had extended far beyond the airplane, influencing lives and inspiring actions across the nation. As the plane lifted off the ground, Ethan felt a renewed sense of hope and determination. The legacy of that flight was a beacon of light, guiding him and countless others toward a future marked by empathy, understanding, and unity. He knew that the journey was far from over, but with each conversation and every act of courage, they were collectively moving closer to a world where everyone felt valued and respected. The final scene of Olivia's documentary captured Ethan standing on a bustling city street, surrounded by a diverse crowd engaged in animated discussions about diversity and inclusion. He looked out over the crowd, a smile of contentment on his face. "This is just the beginning," he whispered. A promise to himself and to the world that meaningful change was not only possible but within reach. As the credits rolled, the audience rose to their feet, inspired by the story of a flight that had transcended its physical confines to become a catalyst for societal transformation. The legacy of Ethan and Laura's journey was a powerful reminder that even in the most unexpected places, moments of connection and understanding could spark a movement toward a more inclusive and compassionate world.